Hello, this is Marshall Bailey from Leadership Initiatives, and I was asked to highlight 3 of our development stories that really changed the way Leadership Initiatives would focus on international development since our inception. So what really triggered the way we would do development Leadership Initiatives was formed when I was working in South African Parliament on the International Development and Corruption Commissions. And during that time, it was my job to visit different communities on the continent of Africa and see how development projects were succeeding or failing. And why I had the opportunity to do that, I was able to see 3 different times where I'm going to highlight here that really showcased what development shouldn't be, so we could make and turn leadership initiatives ideology into what it should be. So the first one where I really encountered and changed the way I looked at international development, I was going to Zimbabwe, and it was my job to look at a large international grant that allowed Zimbabwe to build computer repair shops for any village over 50,000 people. And I would travel throughout the country looking at these computer repair shops, and multiple computer repair shops were just there. So the problem was with this grant is all you had to do was prove you had 50,000 people, and they would give you enough money to build a computer repair center. It didn't matter if your village had electricity. It didn't matter if there wasn't a computer in your village. As long as you hit the population goal, they would allow you to build a computer repair center in your village. So multiple ones I went to, they didn't have running water, they didn't have electricity, but there was a computer repair shop. And what I learned from that issue was that you cannot tell people what they need. If you offer somebody something and they are in need of money or opportunities, they're always going to say yes, even if it's not the right thing for their community. So after that experience, I knew when we were going to create leadership initiatives, we couldn't tell people what they needed. We had to work with them to figure out what was most important for their communities and help them develop that from the ground up. The second time that really changed the way I looked at international development, I was working in Windhoek, Namibia. It's the country right above South Africa. And in the capital of Windhoek, there was this amazing story of 3 women tailoring shop owners who started a business up from scratch. It was featured in their national paper, The Namibian. And the US ambassador to Namibia's wife just was enamored with this story. So she worked with USAID, that's how the United States funds international development, and really pushed to create $1 million grant to allow different people, different communities in Namibia to create women-owned tailoring shops. And this seems like a great idea because the community obviously needed it. The story showcased how these women tailors had brought themselves up, they had their own company, they were changing lives. The problem was that the $1 million grant allowed them to create over 200 different tailoring shops throughout the country. In the capital of Windhoek alone, they went from something like 6 tailoring shops for a community of about 200,000 people to over 50. And all of a sudden, all of these fully funded tailoring shops for USAID were oversaturating the market. So the cost of the cost of fixing up a dress at a tailoring shop dropped dramatically. And each tailoring shop put the next tailoring shop out of business. And by the time all of this ended, the original tailoring shops that started the whole story about the women, empowering the women who created them, actually went out of business because of the ones funded by USAID had a grant to make them last for about 2 years. They had enough funding for it. And they had reduced the cost of bringing a dress in to be tailored at the shop so much that the original tailoring shop couldn't compete and actually went out of business. So it showed me you can't just tell people what they need. You have to work with them to figure out what they need, and you have to work with the community to ensure that they need it. If we had required local investment to get these tailoring shops off the ground, even if the United States was putting up 70% of it, no one would have invested in a tailoring shop probably after the 10th tailoring shop in the community of Windhoek, because they would have known the market had become oversaturated. So it taught us we also need community investment. You need community buy-in. So it needs to be community ideas. It has to be community buy-in for you to have a successful development project in the developing world. The third thing that really transformed the way we worked at international development was I got sent to Botswana. And they had this amazing program. It was a cattle farming program to provide more food for the community. And it was a local idea. It was locally funded. And I got to go there to review the project to see what was going right and wrong with it. And so I flew there and I went to see the programs on the ground. And it was a catastrophe because even though it was a local idea and it was locally funded, they didn't actually train anyone to be cattle farmers. They actually used goat herders because they just assumed goat herding was similar enough to cattle farming that there'd be no problems, working on this project. And so when I got there, these goat herders would be taking these cattle on special grazing routes, so basically up hills and mountains. And a goat is this 300-pound animal. It can make these jumps super easy. Well, when they were taking these cattle up these grazing routes, and they did that because you only need 2 people to watch the cattle, one at the front of the group and one at the bottom, they just assumed these cattle could make these small hurdles, these small jumps. And unfortunately, I'm here to tell you, a 3,000-pound animal cannot make the small jumps that a 300-pound goat can make. And a fair amount of cattle died rolling down hills and falling down hills because they tried to take them on these goat grazing routes. The second thing that really destroyed the economy was they tried to do open grazing. Open grazing is what you see, in movies like City Slickers, where the cattle just walk the land and eat the grass. Well, the problem with that is there's a lot of subsistence farming in Botswana. And if a cattle walked into your farmland and started eating your food, in the United States, oh, that'd be funny if you woke up and saw cattle outside your window eating like some crops. But in Botswana, that's for subsistence farmers, they just grow enough food to live for the year. So if you see a cow eating your stuff, you're like, oh my gosh, that's my daughter's meal in December. That's how she's going to survive in the future. So the subsistence farmers actually started attacking the cattle because they saw them hurting their potential to feed their families in the future. Another huge problem. Eventually it got so bad, one subsistence farmer was actually hurt in a dispute and one person was killed. And it taught me that, when you're doing development, it can't just be a local idea. It can't just be local funding. You also have to train the people how to do that job. So here at Leadership Initiatives, the main thing we learned about international development when we're helping create a business, what we do is we work with the community to always figure out, community leaders to figure out what does the community need. And we bring in local people who want, local leaders who want to open up their own business. And we ask them to come up with an idea and push it. And then we bring in local leaders to confirm that the community actually needs it. And then we get community investment to make sure that the community can support it. And then we bring in outside trainers to ensure if they're opening up a tailoring shop, they actually know how to tailor. If they're opening a mechanic shop, they know what a carburetor is and they know how to fix it. Every step along the way, even chicken farming, we make sure that they are trained to properly understand that field of work so that way they can save lives, grow their community, and transform the nation that they live in. And that is what Leadership Initiatives development programs are all about. Thank you for your time today.